She arrived on the afternoon stage with a carpet bag, a sleeping infant, and a lie she hadn't decided yet whether to tell. It was the spring of 1886, and Iris Vane had answered the advertisement in the St. Louis Gazette 6 weeks after the man who'd promised to marry her had married someone else instead, someone without a baby, someone whose situation was less complicated, someone who hadn't spent 3 months waiting for a letter that never came while her stomach grew and her landlady's patience ran out. The advertisement had been direct. Rancher, 38, established homestead, Eastern Wyoming Territory, seeks woman of sound character and willing disposition for companionship and household management. Previous marriage or widowhood no obstacle. Write to R. Holt, Kara Station. She had written to R. Holt, Kara Station. She had not mentioned the baby. If you've ever had to trust a stranger with the most important thing you had, stay with me to the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this one travels. His name was Reed Holt, and he was standing at the edge of the platform when the stage rolled in, which she knew because he was the only person there holding a piece of paper with her name on it, the way a man does when he's never met someone and wants to be sure he gets the right one. He was taller than she'd imagined from his letters. Broader. He had the kind of face that had been outside in all weather for a long time. Not old exactly, but settled, like something that had found its final form and was comfortable in it. He held the paper with her name on it at his side, not raised, not performing the waiting, just standing. He saw her step off the stage. He saw the bundle against her chest a half-second later. She watched his face. That was all she did in those first 3 seconds, watched his face for what it would do. It did very little. His eyes moved from her face to the infant and back to her face, and something in him recalibrated. She could see it happening, a man doing quick interior arithmetic, and then he walked toward her. "Miss Vane," he said. "Mr. Holt." A pause, not hostile, just honest. "Your letter didn't mention," he said. "No," she said. "It didn't." He looked at her for a moment. She did not look away. She had decided in the last mile of the stage ride that she was done looking away from things, that looking away had cost her everything it was going to cost her, and she was finished paying that particular price. "How old?" he said. 11 weeks. He nodded once, slowly, the way a man does when he's decided something. "Hungry?" he said. She blinked. "It's 2 hours to the ranch. We can get something at the hotel before we head out if you need it." She stared at him. She stopped. "Yes," she said. "That would be welcome." He picked up her carpet bag. They walked to the hotel. His name, she discovered over the course of the meal, was Reed Callum Holt, the Callum being his mother's family, and the source of some confusion at the post office for the first 5 years he'd had the ranch, because the postmaster kept filing his letters under C. He'd been in Wyoming for 11 years, having come out from Ohio after his first wife died of fever in their second year of marriage. He'd built the ranch from a single-room claim cabin and 200 acres of grassland, and had expanded it steadily by the kind of method he described as showing up every day and doing the next thing. He had no children. He had placed the advertisement, he said, because the ranch had reached the size where running it alone was not practical, and running it alone was also, he added, without any particular drama, lonely in a way he'd gotten tired of. She listened to all of this and told him her own version, which was accurate in every particular except one. She said she'd been engaged to a man in St. Louis who had died before the wedding. She'd been telling that version for 6 weeks. She knew its shape. She watched his face while she told it. His face listened. Whether it believed was harder to say. The ranch was called Dunmore, a name he'd taken from a creek on the north edge of the property that had been named by the first trapper through the region for reasons nobody remembered anymore. The house was single-story, solidly built, added onto in stages she could read in the construction, the original cabin core, a kitchen addition, a bedroom wing that was newer than the rest. There was a barn, a smokehouse, a root cellar with a door that stuck, a kitchen garden that had been planted by someone who knew what they were doing, and 3 ranch hands who came out of the barn when the wagon pulled up and looked at her and the baby with a range of expressions. The youngest one, a boy of perhaps 17 named Clem, said, "Is that a baby?" with the enthusiasm of someone who had not seen one recently. The second one, a broad, quiet man named Arvis, said nothing but nodded at her in a way that felt like welcome. The third one looked at the baby, and then at Reed, and then at the sky, which she would learn was how he responded to most things. "That's Walt," Reed said. "He's not unfriendly." "All right," she said. The baby, who had been asleep since Kara Station, chose this moment to wake up and announce his wakefulness at volume. "His name is Daniel," she said. Reed looked at the yelling infant with the expression of a man taking inventory. "All right, Daniel," he said. The first weeks were the weeks of learning the shape of things. She learned the house, where it was warm and where it was cold, which floorboard creaked in a way that woke Daniel, how the kitchen stove needed coaxing in the mornings and then ran hot all afternoon. She learned the rhythms of the ranch, which were different from anything she'd managed before but not incomprehensible, built on the same logic of daily need and seasonal pressure that she'd been navigating since she was old enough to keep a house. She was a capable woman. She had always been a capable woman. In St. Louis, that had been, mostly, invisible. The kind of capability that makes everything run smoothly and is only noticed when it stops. Here it was visible immediately, because a working ranch in Wyoming made no provision for invisible capability. Either things were done or they weren't. Things were done. Reed noticed. She could tell he noticed in the way he didn't make a production of it, the way he simply registered it and adjusted, the way a practical man adjusts to a practical fact. Daniel was an easy baby, which she understood to be luck, and was grateful for it. He slept in reasonable intervals. He ate reliably. He regarded the world with the interested expression of someone who had arrived somewhere new and was working out its rules. Clem, who was 17 and had 3 younger siblings back in Kansas and therefore knew more about infants than he initially let on, could be drafted into walking Daniel around the kitchen when he was fussy, and did so with the confidence of someone who had done it before and was not going to pretend otherwise. "He likes it when you walk faster," Clem told her on the 3rd day. "I know," she said. "How do you know?" "Little ones always do. My ma said it's because they can hear your heart better when you move." She looked at this 17-year-old boy who was relaying his mother's wisdom about infant care in the kitchen of a Wyoming ranch house. "Your mother was right," she said. Reed was not a complicated man, but he was not a simple one. She worked that out in the first month. He was quiet in the way of someone who had spent years being the only person responsible for a large thing and had learned that most speech was expendable. He said what needed to be said and left the rest. But what he said was accurate. She found no gap between what he told her and what she found to be true. The root cellar door did stick. The south pasture fence needed work before spring. Walt was not unfriendly. He treated her with respect that was not performance. The difference was in the consistency. It didn't appear when he wanted something and evaporate when he didn't. It was simply how he operated, and he was good with Daniel. She noticed this carefully, the way she noticed everything carefully, as a woman in an uncertain situation notices things. He didn't perform goodness with the baby. He didn't make a show of it, or look to see if she was watching. He just responded when Daniel was present, the way you respond to something small and real that is asking something of you. One evening in the 3rd week, she came into the main room and found Reed sitting at the table with Daniel on his knee, the baby upright with his fist wrapped around Reed's finger, both of them looking at each other in the particular serious way of an adult and an infant conducting an examination. Reed had not heard her come in. She stood in the doorway for a moment and watched. He said, very quietly, to the baby, "You've got her eyes." Not to her, not for her, just to Daniel, as a simple observation. She went back to the kitchen. She stood at the stove for a while with her hands still. The letter came in the 6th week. She saw it in the mail that Arvis brought back from Kara Station on the supply run, and she knew it before she picked it up, because the handwriting was the one she had stopped expecting. Martin Carey. She took it to the bedroom and opened it and read it, and then sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. He was married now. She'd known that. The letter was not about that. The letter was about Daniel. He'd heard, through whatever chain of information connects people who were once close, that the child had been born. He wanted to know. He wanted to be clear that he had no intention of claiming any responsibility. He wanted to make sure she understood that he trusted her to keep the matter private. He wanted her to know, in the polite language of a man protecting himself, that he would prefer Daniel not carry his name. He'd signed it, "Yours sincerely," which was the detail she sat with longest. She read it twice, and then folded it carefully and put it in the bottom of the carpet bag under everything else. She went back to the kitchen and started supper. Reed found her on the porch after the hands had gone to the bunkhouse and Daniel was asleep, and the evening had settled into the kind of quiet that Wyoming did better than any place she'd known, a quiet that wasn't empty, that was full of the sound of the land doing what the land did. He sat in the other chair the way he did some evenings, not making conversation, just present. She had learned that this was one of the ways he was companionable, through parallel presence rather than talk. Tonight, she didn't want parallel presence. "I need to tell you something," she said. He turned and looked at her with the steady attention she'd come to recognize. She told him the true version. The whole thing, not the dead fiancé but the living one, Martin Carey, who had courted her and promised her and left her when the situation became inconvenient. The 3 months waiting, the letter that didn't come, the landlady, the advertisement in the Gazette, and the letter she'd written, and the things she hadn't put in it. She told him about the letter that had arrived today and what was in it. She looked at her hands while she talked. When she finished, she looked up. Reed was looking at the darkness beyond the porch. His expression was the one she couldn't fully read, the one he got when he was working something out in the part of himself that didn't translate directly to his face. "He doesn't want to be Daniel's father," he said. "Not a question." "No." "He put that in writing." "He did." Reed was quiet for a moment. "Keep the letter," he said. She looked at him. "Keep it somewhere safe. A man who puts something like that in writing has given you something. If he ever changes his mind about staying away, you have documentation of what he said." She stared at him. "That's—" She stopped. "That's a very practical response." "It's a practical situation." She looked at his profile in the evening light. "You're not angry?" He turned and looked at her. "With who?" "With me. For not telling you. For arriving here with—" "You arrived here with a baby and told me the truth when it mattered," he said. "I'm not going to spend energy being angry about the order." She looked at him for a long moment. "Most men would—" "I'm not most men," he said, not proudly, just as information. The porch was quiet. The creek ran somewhere to the north in the dark. "I want to ask you something," he said. She waited. "When you wrote to me, before you knew anything about who I was, what were you hoping for?" She thought about it honestly, the way the question deserved. "Safety," she said. "For Daniel, mostly. A place where he'd be safe and have enough." She paused. "And someone decent. I didn't know if that was possible. I knew I was asking for something under difficult terms, but I hoped for decent." "And?" he said. She looked at him. "You're decent," she said. "You're considerably more than decent, actually, and I'm aware that I don't deserve to have gotten that lucky." He looked at the dark again. "I don't think luck is the right word for it." "What's the right word?" A long pause. "I think you make choices," he said. "And sometimes the choices are good, and sometimes they aren't, and the ones that seem like luck are usually just the good ones landing." He paused again. "You wrote an honest letter, most of it. You came out here with a baby, and you didn't pretend, and you worked, and you didn't ask for more than what we'd agreed. That's not luck, that's character." She looked at this man, this quiet, careful, decent man, in the spring dark of his porch. "Reed," she said. He looked at her. "What are we doing?" she said, not unkindly, just honestly, the way she was trying to do everything now. He held her gaze with the steadiness that was his particular quality, the steadiness of a man who had been alone for 11 years and knew the weight of it. "I think," he said, "we're doing what people do when they're building something. We're figuring out what goes where." "And Daniel?" He didn't hesitate. "Daniel's part of what's being built," he said. "He was part of it the minute I picked up your carpet bag on that platform and didn't put it back down." She looked at him for a long time. Then she said, "His father's name was Martin." "I know," he said. "You told me." "I mean," she stopped. "I mean, that's all that name is going to mean to him. A fact, not a presence, not a person." She looked at her hands. "He's going to grow up asking who his father is." Reed was very still. "I know that," she said, "and I don't know what to tell him." The silence stretched between them, not uncomfortably, but with the weight of something real. "Tell him the truth," Reed said, "when he's old enough, that there was a man who didn't stay, and a man who did." He looked at her steadily, and that the one who stayed thought he was worth staying for. She felt something give way in her chest, something she'd been holding rigid for months, the locked thing, the defended thing, the thing she'd built out of necessity and had not known how to put down. "That's what you'd tell him?" "That's what I'd show him," he said. "Every day, and when he's old enough to understand what it means, you can tell him the words." They married in July, quietly, in the front room of Dunmore Ranch with the county clerk and Arvis and Clem as witnesses. Walt stood at the back of the room. He had put on a clean shirt for the occasion, which everyone understood to be significant. Daniel, who was 5 months old and had recently discovered his own feet, spent the ceremony investigating them with profound concentration from a blanket on the floor. Afterward, Clem said, "He didn't cry," which he appeared to feel was a good sign, and nobody disagreed. Summer settled into autumn, and autumn into the first winter, and she learned what Wyoming winter meant in her bones, the way you learn things that live in your body, rather than your memory. She learned which storms announced themselves, and which arrived without courtesy. She learned the particular quality of silence that came before the bad ones. She learned to read the cattle the way Reed read them, the behavioral shifts that said something was coming. Reed taught her these things the way he did everything, without ceremony, as simple transfers of useful information. He did not condescend, he did not simplify. He told her what he knew in the same way he would have told another rancher, on the assumption that she was capable of taking it in and using it. She was. Daniel grew. He was a serious baby who became a cheerful infant, who became, by his first winter, a person with opinions that he expressed through a combination of sounds and gestures and the very direct eye contact of someone who had learned early that the adults around him were responsive. He said, first, which made her eyes fill in a way she hadn't prepared for. He said, "Da." 6 weeks later, looking directly at Reed, who was across the kitchen and had his back turned, and Reed turned around the way you turn when something catches at you, and looked at the baby and said, very quietly, "Yeah." She saw it. She didn't say anything about it. She held it instead, the way you hold certain things. The following spring, she found him in the barn on a March evening after supper, doing the last check on a mare who'd been unsettled all week. Daniel was on his hip, which had become a natural position for both of them. Daniel accepted being carried by Reed with the complete ease of someone who had known it his whole life, because he had. She stood in the barn doorway and watched Reed check the mare with one hand while Daniel patted the wood of the stall with the other, narrating something in the language of a 1-year-old that was not yet words but was clearly meant as words. Reed answered him, seriously, point by point, as if the narration made sense, which to Daniel it did, and to Reed apparently it was enough that Daniel thought so. She thought about Martin Carey's letter at the bottom of her carpet bag. She thought about the advertisement in the Gazette, and the letter she'd written, and the thing she hadn't put in it, and the platform at Cara Station, and the piece of paper with her name on it held at his side, not raised, not performing. She thought about what it meant that a man could read a situation in 3 seconds and pick up a carpet bag anyway. "Reed," she said. He turned. Daniel turned with him, still narrating. I want you to know something, she said. He waited. I came here for Daniel, she said. That was true. He was the reason I wrote the letter, the reason I got on the stage, the reason I walked onto that platform with a lie half-formed and hoped for the best. She looked at him steadily. But that's not why I'm staying. He looked at her with the expression she knew now, the one that wasn't loud. Why are you staying? He said. She looked at her husband and her son in the March lamplight of their barn. Because this is where my family is, she said. He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he crossed the barn and put his free hand against her face, which was not a small gesture for a man who didn't make them easily, and she put her hand over his, and Daniel, finding himself at the center of something he didn't have words for yet, but could apparently feel, put both his hands on top of theirs, and looked between them with his serious infant eyes. Hi, he said, which was, she thought, just about right. There is a particular kind of family that is not made by blood or circumstance, but by choice. By the decision, made in the face of incomplete information and real risk and no guarantee of anything, to stay, to pick up the carpet bag, to answer the letter, to turn around when a baby says your name. It is not a lesser kind of family for any of that. It is perhaps a more deliberate one, built from the parts people chose to bring, rather than the parts they were simply given, and therefore built with a certain awareness of what it is, what it cost, what it asks. Daniel Holt would grow up on that ranch. He would learn to read the cattle and the weather and the particular silence before the bad storms. He would learn from Clem and Arvis and Walt, who was not unfriendly, and he would learn most of all from the two people who had found each other on a platform in Kara Station in the spring of 1886, and decided, in the span of 3 seconds and the lift of a carpet bag, to try. He would ask, when he was old enough, about his father, and he would be told the truth, all of it, in the age-appropriate order, without flinching, that there was a man who hadn't stayed and a man who had, and that the one who stayed had thought he was worth staying for from the first moment, before there was any reason to, before there was any promise of return, for no better reason than that it was right, which is the only reason that has ever been enough, which is the only reason that ever needed to be.